Welcome back. Canada's next prime minister is pledging to take on President Trump. Former central banker Mark Carney was elected leader of the ruling Liberal Party. This as Mr. Trump imposes tariffs and again seems to threaten to turn Canada into America's 51st state. Carney is not taking this, as was evident in his speech last night.
We didn't ask for this fight. We didn't ask for this fight. But Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the gloves. So the Americans, they should make no mistake, in trade as in hockey, Canada will win.
Ed O'Keefe and Shanelle Kaul join us now. Ed O'Keefe is in Ottawa. Shanelle is on our Studio 57 in New York. Ed, who is Mark Carney? He has a rather long history, a kind of storied history economically in Canada, stepping into an enormously important role when Canada needs and wants to push back.
I thought we were renaming the show for these few minutes Canada Decides.
Canada Decides. I think go right ahead, Ed.
Good to see. All right. Look, Mark Carney is a Harvard-educated economist who once worked for Goldman Sachs, has spent, obviously, a fair amount of time in the United States, so understands the U.S.-Canada relationship. As you point out, was head of Canada's central bank, also ran the Bank of England around the time Brexit was being voted on and taking effect. So he's got real good, solid understanding of the global economy and the effects of things like tariffs. Walloped his competition in this race for head of the Liberal Party last night with 85% of the vote, and will take the mantle from Justin Trudeau at some point later this week and become prime minister. The question at that point is, well, for how long will he be prime minister? Because he's got to call a general election anytime between the moment he becomes prime minister and October, essentially. There's some speculation here in Canada's capital. He may call it right away because his Liberal Party is catching back up to the Conservatives after they had a nearly double-digit advantage earlier this year before the president started threatening tariffs and annexing Canada, which has just infuriated Canadians all across this country with that kind of talk, and as they realize that he's getting quite serious, at least, about the tariffs.
And Shanelle, for the purposes of this segment, it is Canada Decides. Ontario has decided to impose a 25% increase on electricity exports to the United States. You spoke with that province's energy minister. How much of an impact will all this have on the states targeted by this particular increase?
Well, Ontario officials majors say that this will impact about 1.5 million Americans in those three bordering states. So we're talking about Minnesota, Michigan, and New York. They are saying this will cost the U.S. about $400,000 each day. That 25% surcharge is put in place. Now, I spoke to the minister earlier today, and he said he hopes it will financially impact those Americans in those three bordering states, especially those who voted for Trump, to fix the economy. Listen.
We want to make clear we actually have a great sense of love and affection for the American people. We share the values and the same democratic aspirations. So it's very regrettable we're here, and there's only one person, one man that can be blamed for the situation we are in, and that is President Trump.
So I asked Minister Stephen Lecce, what is the goal here? He says, look, we just want to renegotiate that USMCA deal, which, Major Ed, you'll remember, was signed by President Donald Trump.
To that point, Ed, do the Canadians you've had a chance to talk with assume there is a way out of this rhetorical impasse before it becomes a full-blown trade and economic confrontation?
They're essentially waiting for the United States to blink, Major, because in their view, they will back off these electricity tariffs. The Premier of Ontario today also once again didn't rule out cutting off the electricity entirely to the United States as a potential response. All of it would stop, however, if President Trump backs off. There is no indication that's going to happen anytime soon, at least from the White House. So, in essence, then this is going to continue. And this country especially is getting ready for that. A big concern, for example, about steel workers in parts of this country, concerns about what it'll mean for the everyday consumer who is increasingly trying to buy local or buy Canadian, and anticipating price increases on some goods, and concerns, of course, about the auto sector, the auto parts sector, and whether the oil and gas industry in this country, especially in Alberta, might consider holding back at some point the supply that goes into the United States every day. There's even talk here during this election season about focusing less on building pipelines to the south and perhaps focusing on building pipelines to the east and west so that this country itself can take more advantage of what it's been selling to the United States. and maybe even ship it out in other directions to the rest of the world. So, you know, their bottom line up here is this: the moment President Trump drops this for good, we're good. But until then, or unless that happens, some kind of retaliation will continue to occur.
And Shanelle, let the audience know what's next with this electricity conversation. Could it bleed into other energy sectors as well?
Well, at this point, Ontario officials have said, Major, 25% could increase if they don't see some kind of negotiation take place soon. I asked, we didn't get really a clear timeline on this, but as Ed mentioned as well, cutting off energy entirely is not off the table. So I asked Minister Stephen Lecce today, what would happen if America just got its energy elsewhere? Here's what he said.
If you're not buying them from democratic Canada, then you're going to have to buy them from despotic regimes abroad, be it from Putin or from China or from other authoritarian regimes who do not share our strategic geopolitical interests and democratic values. So I want to believe that cooler heads will prevail.
And really notable to mention, Major, that Ontario officials are saying this particular retaliatory tariff on the energy sector will probably go beyond just those 3 states that they started with targeting, again, Minnesota, Michigan, and New York, because they say a lot of those states will take that Canadian energy and then upsell it to other parts of the country.
Ed O'Keefe in Ottawa, Shanelle Kaul in New York. Thank you for putting together this Canada Decides segment.